The news has been a whirl this week, and we have a lot to discuss, from Redfall's cringy launch to the Xbox Summer Showcase. So let's get right into it. The team at Kinda Funny spoke with Phil Spencer on the XCast. Phil was asked about the brutal launch of Redfall and how they're dealing with the low reviews for this game.
Yeah, maybe I'll hit Redfall, but I'll just say all up. There's nothing that's more difficult for me than disappointing the Xbox community. I've been a part of it for a long time. I obviously work on Xbox, head of the business, have a lot of friends, get a lot of feedback. And just to kind of watch the community lose confidence, be disappointed. I'm disappointed. I'm upset with myself. I kind of revisit our process. I think back to the announcement of 60 frames per second, and then we weren't shipping 60 frames per second. That was kind of our punch in the chin, rightfully, a couple weeks ago. And then seeing the game come out, and the critical response was not what we wanted. And it's disappointing. And so kind of pick myself up. What can we learn? How can we get better? One thing I'll fight is kind of what went wrong. There's clearly quality and execution things that we can do. But one thing I won't do is push against creative aspirations of our teams. Then a lot of people will say, hey, you've got teams know how to do one kind of game. Just force them to go do the one kind of game that they have a proven track record for. And I'm just not a believer in that. Maybe that means I'll underdeliver for some of our fans out there. But when a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded, when Tango wants to go do Hi-Fi, when everybody probably thought they were doing Evil Within 3, I want to give the teams the creative platform to go and push their ability, push their aspirations. But I also need to have a great selection of games that are continue to come that surprise and delight our fans. And we under-delivered on that. And for that, I apologize. It's not what I expect, not what I want. But it's ours to deliver.
Now, Phil's comments here are kind of foreshadowing some of what is said later in this podcast. I am certain that neither he nor Arcane wanted to release a game that basically did this. Yes, Redfall did fail as a AAA game, and it did and continues to have its problems. However, I will say that it does have some really good points as well, and I believe that given the proper amount of time, it can be a good game that is well worth playing. Phil was then asked about what the decision-making process looks like as to whether or not to delay a game that is incomplete like Redfall and Halo Infinite were.
Well, I think those are, and I'm happy to go very deep on this. I think if I think about a team's execution on a game, we had a creative vision, and did we realize that vision through the game that we created? That's not a delay question if the answer is no. Like, you can't take something that you started on. This isn't a Redfall specific conversation, right? But we will build games that review in the high 80s, and we will build games that review in the 60s. I mean, it's just kind of part of being in game publishing. And if you're afraid of that, then you shouldn't be in the entertainment business. You shouldn't be in the games business. That said, every time we deliver something below our own internal expectations that surprises us, we should check our process. I don't look at the review scores on Redfall, and there are quality issues, and we're working on those. But I think there's a fundamental piece of feedback that we get that the game isn't realizing the creative vision that it had for its players. That doesn't feel like hey, just delay it. That feels like the game had a goal to do one thing, and when players are actually playing, they're not feeling that thing. They're not feeling the creative execution of the team. When a game needs to be delayed, what we did with Halo, we did with Starfield, we did with Redfall, because the production timeline is saying we have this vision and our production timelines don't get us to the completion of that vision, we do delay games. We do that. Learning about the quality, there are clearly, I've seen them. I know there are bugs in Redfall that's launching. But when I look at like the crash rates on the game, because we get all the telemetry of everything that's happened, it's not out of proportion for a game that has just launched. It's kind of in the pocket of what we would expect. That's not to deny any of the animation, streaming of texture bugs, the AI bugs that we've seen. We will go work on those. But when I look at the review scores of this game, it's did we have enough of creative differentiation in our core idea? And did we realize that creative ambition? I'm a huge supporter of Arcane Austin. Their track record is awesome. I love a lot of the great games that they've built. This is one where the team didn't hit their own internal goals when it launched. I think it's maybe a little simplistic to just say, hey, if you would have just delayed it 3 months, the core creative of the game would have delivered on something that was different than what it was. So I look at them at different camps. If there's a production timeline issue, we've been open to delaying. If we just have more bugs than we should have at the end of a game, we're open to delaying. At some point, we have to have a creative vision and put the game out, and reviewers and players will tell us what they think.
Phil's answer here was very telling. For one, it says the goals for producing the game were met, those being the goals set by the creative team. This can mean many things, but I think it means that they may have wanted more time to work out the bugs, but it didn't necessitate another delay to do so. The fact that, as Phil stated, they are working on fixing the issues that the game has right now is encouraging, and sometimes it is necessary to release the game that may not be in its best possible state. I know, I just heard that collective groan. I get it. I thought the same thing. However, I also had to look at it from the other side of the coin. The game may be in a poor state, but that does not mean that it is unplayable. It is certainly playable and can even be completed without any major issues. I have seen many people streaming this game, and for some it runs just fine, and others it has its challenges. On Steam, the game is ranked among the lowest games and is dead last for Bethesda titles. By that same token, on Game Pass, the game has very high rankings and is the second most played game behind the juggernaut Minecraft. This means that there are people out there that are not necessarily running into the problems that are being featured by the critics. So yes, I take this into account. This does not mean that the game is great, it just means that it can certainly be enjoyable. The next question was a two-parter. Part 1 centered around the internal process and expectations for how a game will be received. Part 2 centered around the comparison between the old days of releasing a game and it being done versus how it is done today.
No, well, at first I thought your words about creative ambition of teams, you especially, I mean, you've lived this, you've done this, are very well said and very spot on. So thank you for that. And that's why I love your voice in this community, because you've created, you've seen kind of ups, and as anybody in the industry, we've all seen downs. And on the score, yeah, we do mock reviews for every game that we launch, and this is like double digits lower than we thought we would be with this game went through our mock reviews. And that's what's one of the disappointing things. Like we would never strive to launch a game that we thought was going to review in the low 60s. It's not part of our goals. If you look at our review scores over the last year, it's not a defense at all. If you look at the review scores over the last year, I think the teams have done a better job in upping the level of quality of the games that we've shipped. Some of those games first shipped on PlayStation, but still, when I go through the list of the games, you still have to build a game, you still have to ship a game. And this game was significantly below our internal metrics in terms of where it actually reviewed. But that's not on anybody but us. Like, we have to own that. In terms of our commitment to the game, absolutely. The team at Arcane is on taking the near-term feedback. We're still working on the 60 frames per second. We have a good timeline for that. We're committed to getting that done. And we're going to continue to work the game. I think we've shown a commitment to games like Sea of Thieves and like Grounded to continue to go and build games. But I also know that these games are $70, and I'm not gonna I'm gonna take full responsibility for launching a game that needs to be great. I think what I have with the Xbox community, what I am a part of, is a team. There's still questions that pop every so often of how committed is the company to this category. When are we just going to push Xbox out of the market? There's a lot of Twitter firing of Phil right now, which is fine. I'm way overpaid for the role I have anyway. So I get that's my responsibility. But we will remain committed to the game and the players as long as the players want to go play games. And that's my commitment to the community. I'm kind of at a low point right now in terms of my delivery on that commitment to the community. But it very much stays. I want to support the team. I want to support the creative ambitions of the teams. And I want to support the players. And we let a lot of people down this week with the launch of the game. But we will continue to strive on. You have to, right? That's what creative is about.
Phil acknowledged the fact that Redfall reviewed much lower than they expected it would, and he reiterated the commitment to fix the game post-launch. As far as the second part of the question, Phil addressed the fact that the good old days were never going to happen again, which is a true statement based on how the entire industry has gone. The next question was about the upcoming showcase, more to the point, asking about the process in deciding to announce a game that may not be releasing for years, and what was learned from the last showcase.
Yeah, and you might try to get me on positive. I'm not in positive mode this week, so I'll apologize for staying in kind of cranky mode. But in terms of lessons learned, and I'll even go back to the Redfall videos on IGN of showing videos of the game running at 60 on PC, at the point knowing that the game was going to run 30 frames per second at launch on console. We have to be transparent about what we're showing, that what we're showing is representative of what our console customer, our most committed customer to our brand, financially committed, what they're going to see, what they're going to play, and that transparency just has to get better. And I'm not pointing at anybody but myself, right? I guess at some point I will have enough knocks against me that it's somebody else here. But that I think it's transparency in what we're building, what our aspiration is for the game, what it's going to look like, what the features are. And it drives me crazy when we self-inflicted wounds of kind of putting things out there of communication that's confusing or misleading about what the actual end product is going to be. So you can try to take me to positive space. I'm just not in that headspace right now. That said, when I go and I look at Showcase, and I'm not going to try to oversell Showcase here, because if I were on the other side of watching this, it's like, hey, after Redfall, I'm going to put my hands on the controller, and that's what's going to take to kind of prove to me. But that's not what Showcase is. So I'm very enthusiastic about Showcase. We're going to announce some things that people haven't seen, some new games. We're going to give updates to some of the things that were on your list. The other thing that gets me really excited is when I look forward over the next quarters, which has always been my focus of how do we get a big game out every quarter at quality, that things are lining up finally after some of the slowdown through COVID. I'm tired of talking about that. But I can now see that we've got games coming every quarter that I think will surprise and delight our customers. We still have to deliver on the creative. We still have to deliver on the technical. Not every game we ship is for everybody. We know that. I'm not trying to build the one game to rule them all. We will have different creative takes and we have a very diverse portfolio when you think about the stuff that Microsoft Game Studios builds. But I like that. I think for what we're trying to do as Xbox, which isn't to mimic any of the other platforms out there, it's create our own brand and identity. The diversity of what we build, hopefully will end up being a strength. But we have to do it at quality. We have to do it on time. And we have to show people what they're actually going to see. We have to show gameplay. And I think I'm kind of beyond that. We've got to put great games in the hands of our players. There's nothing else.
Phil was visibly and verbally upset about the fact that some of what was talked about before the release of games like Redfall and some of the misleading information as to features and capabilities of the game. He wants it to be done with more transparency. The other part Phil spoke about was how excited he gets for the showcases because it's when they get to surprise people. He was very clear that it is not his intention to release games that are in poor condition, and that they are committing to deliver in the best way possible. The next question was about the process as it relates to Redfall, to find out what went wrong and what is going to be done to correct it.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think I love your quote, Gary. I might lift that from you. People don't have to care about this, but I'll talk about it. When we acquire studios, there's games that are in development when we acquire a studio, and then there's things that are either really early in development or not even conceived yet. And I think we need to improve on engaging in games that are midway through production when they become part of Xbox. I do think there's a different expectation for a game and even a team when you've been third party and all of a sudden you become part of first party. There's a different expectation in terms of how you're going to perform on our console. I think there's a different competitive set when people look at what this game is and the other games that they're going to say, hey, I want this game to feel as competitive as this other game on another console platform in our case. And we didn't do a good job early on in engaging with Arcane Austin to really help them understand what it meant to be part of Xbox and part of first party, and use some of our internal resources to help them and kind of move along that journey even faster. So we kind of left them to go work on the game. They're a very talented team. I love that team, and I still do, and I will totally bet on them to do another great game. But when Matt Booty and Jamie Leader, who's running ZeniMax, and I sit down, I think we can engage earlier with our different studios. And I do think there's a difference when we come in when the creative's already set on a game. That's not washing our hands of any of the creative. Every game we ship from our teams is an Xbox game. And so it's a full responsibility for it. But thinking about how our internal processes of dev assistance, even some of our internal ATG resources, what's the Advanced Technology Group, and how those work with our internal teams, I think we can do a better job with our internal teams. We did a better job with Starfield. Again, nobody should believe it until they're playing the game, but that game was earlier on in production, and it was easier for us to kind of swarm a bunch of people to go and kind of help with some of the technology on our platform and ensure that we're going to ship a quality experience there. And we should have been there for Harvey and the team earlier. I think that's on us. And then through the process, it's an Unreal game. We have a bunch of studios that have done some really great work on Unreal over the years. And I think we were too late to help in that when they had certain issues that they were working through, which any team will. It's nothing to do with the specific engine. But we have a lot of experience, and we needed to get on that earlier with the team. And we didn't do that. And that's not an excuse. You asked just to kind of diagnose. So when the 60 frames per second issue came up, we were definitely diving in. We had people from the Coalition and people from Rare and stuff looking, both teams that have done some really great work with Unreal to help us build a 60 FPS plan. But obviously that was a plan that had to be in place last fall in order for us to really be in a position to have it at launch. And I take that as learning, as painful as it is. But as you said, it's part of getting to success are those learnings and that diagnosis. There's a bunch of other stuff I could go into, but then we end up with kind of dev doc, which I'm happy to do. But
Phil alluded to the fact that Xbox did not invest in Redfall because it was already so far in development when they came into the family. Phil took that hands-off approach. He also said that this failure made them take a look at the internal process to aid in the development. So basically, it comes down to communication between the developers and Xbox. This didn't happen efficiently enough and caused the game to not be as ready as it could have been, given the fact that it does take time to implement fixes. Again, Phil restated that they are committed to making sure that the issues that caused Redfall to fail as hard as it did will be and are being worked on. I believe this is not just referencing the game itself, but also the processes and communication between teams. I firmly believe that Phil will make this right and that Microsoft and Bethesda will deliver going forward. Which brings us to Starfield. While working on this video, the ESRB rating for Starfield was released in the US. In the rating summary, it states this is an open-world role-playing game in which players assume the role of a miner tasked with finding artifacts across the galaxy. From first and third-person perspectives, players interact with various characters, complete quests, and search for supplies while battling enemies. Players use futuristic guns, lasers, axes, and explosives to kill enemies. Combat is fast-paced with frequent gunfire, cries of pain, and explosions. Attacks on some enemies can result in blood spatter effects. Several environments depict bloodstains on the ground around corpses. The game contains some suggestive material in the dialogue, and after sharing a bed with characters with statements such as, "Life is a sexually transmitted disease that's 100% fatal. I'm all for getting a little wild, but this time let's try it without the jetpacks and talk about seeing stars." Woo! That was amazing. A fictional drug, Aurora, is prominent in the game, with a section involving players' characters working in an illicit drug lab. Players can also obtain Aurora by stealing or buying it from vendors. Consuming the drug results in the screen becoming distorted. The words fuck and bullshit also appear in the game. All of this resulted in Starfield getting an M rating, which in the US means that you have to be 17 years of age or older to purchase it. Personally, nothing listed here was shocking to me, but then again, my expectations are based on what I've seen released by Bethesda before in the Fallout games. I would expect that Starfield follows a similar line when it comes to the game's operation and graphical nature. As for the sexuality part, I would expect that it follows the same Fallout 4 vibe, where we have some dialogue, and then the screen fades to black for a few seconds, and we hear some lines as the screen comes back. Most everything listed in the rating we already knew about, so I didn't find it very shocking, but it is nice to have confirmation for the said pieces to the puzzle. Getting the rating means that the game is on track for its new expected release date. We certainly will hear more, as the showcase is just a few weeks out now. We also got some details about the Xbox Showcase. The showcase will air on June 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, and will be followed immediately by the Starfield Direct. An extended show will air on June 13th at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, and that will have in-depth interviews. The showcase will be cast on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, so you can watch wherever you want. So be sure to tune in. Don't worry though, if you are not able to make it to the live showing, I will be covering the event in all of its glory, while adding my own personal touch and charm as well. I know we talked about a lot in this episode, and I want to bring us back to Redfall for just a moment. Nobody likes to see a new IP fail because it does not benefit anyone. Keep in mind, these types of things happen, especially when it is the team that is trying something entirely new for them. Try not to be so hard on the developers. They really don't set out to fail. Even games that are beloved now, like New Vegas, had failure launches. Given time, Redfall will bounce back, and I am sure it will be loved too. Have you played Redfall? If so, what were your thoughts on it? Did it meet your expectations? Is there something you're looking forward to in the Xbox Showcase? Was there something that shocked you about the rating for Starfield? Sound off in the comments below. While you're at it, like, subscribe, and share. And as always, I'm just glad you stopped by, and I'll see you in the next one.